We've all used the word risk in conversations. Maybe we played a game called Risk. And we have ideas about what that word means. In formal management, however, risk always means uncertainty. Risk is a function of what you don't know or you're not sure about. And that always makes decisions harder to make. In this unit, we want to look at decision-making under conditions of uncertainty and the management of risk. Now, this is a chart that lays out the concept of risk in decisions. On one side, we have decisions made under certainty conditions, conditions dealing with objective probabilities. And objective probabilities are essentially known facts. Decisions at this side of the chart are easy to make because we know everything that affects the decision. We're very sure of the outcome associated with our decision. It's the other side of the chart that's a little bit scary. That's decisions made under conditions of uncertainty. And in this case, we have subjective probabilities, which are simply things we are not sure about, things that we have to guess about. The closer we get to certainty, the easier the decisions are to make. But often the decisions under conditions of uncertainty are the most important decisions a business makes in executing its plans. And as a result, those are the decisions that senior managers are most often involved in making. Risk comes in two flavors. When managers talk about risk, they talk about upside risk and downside risk. And these are simply the idea that upside risk, how much better could the outcome be than the outcome that you expect? Downside risk, how much worse it could be. So in this chart, we have a sales forecast. We have a prediction right here about what we will sell in year 8 of our plan. Upside risk is the chance that we have underestimated sales and that sales will actually be much better than we expect in year 8. Downside risk, just the opposite. Upside risk is always a good thing. Downside risk is not. So what we try and do is minimize downside risk, maximize upside risk. The two are not always parallel. They're not always symmetrical. The downside risk can't go below 0. It's impossible to sell less than nothing. Whereas the upside risk might be theoretically unlimited. Before you make a decision, pay attention to both the upside and the downside risk. Now, the ability to take more risks means the opportunity to gain more upsides. It means the opportunity to do more new things, launch more products, enter new markets, create new business plans, which gives you a considerable competitive advantage. If you can take more risks than your competitors, you are in a position to grow faster, produce more products, and generally be more successful. But what keeps businesses from taking risks? There are a couple of decision-making types. For the ones in the conditions of certainty, we usually use something called program risks. These are risks that are made under conditions of, or decisions made under conditions of very low risk. We typically make the decision exactly the same way. These decisions can be made by very junior people with very little experience, or they can be made by machines. It's the non-programmed decisions that are typically important, especially in assessing your ability to gain the upside. Non-programmed decisions are the decisions made under conditions of great uncertainty. These offer much higher risk. They require deep analysis before you make them. Each decision is a unique decision about a unique situation. They're typically made by technical experts or very senior managers in an organization. These are the decisions that often affect your long-term success, that defend your competitive advantage, and that are affected highly by your ability to take risks. A couple of ways to think about decision making. is a process called rational decision making and another called bounded rationality. Rational decision making, the verb there is to optimize, which means to select the very best possible outcome. The idea is to take all of the available data, all of considerable analysis, and produce a decision that produces the best possible outcome. Bounded rationality tries to satisfy, and satisfy simply means I'll take the first solution that comes along that works. And we'll look at why you would use one of those versus the other. This is kind of a picture of how you do some rational decision making. Define the problem, establish criteria, weigh those criteria, look at alternatives, evaluate each one, choose the best of all the possible alternatives, then implement that decision that you've just made, evaluate that decision, and then repeat this process as necessary. This is a very elaborate way to make a decision. It's complex, it involves huge amounts of data and lots of analysis. In the end, this could produce the best possible decision, but we may all be dead by the time you get through to that decision. So rational decision making is used when companies have lots of time and lots of money and can take as long as they want and spend as much as they want on that decision process. That actually seldom happens in real life. More commonly, we use a bounded rational model. Bounded rationality is when we look at a much smaller set of possibilities. We draw a boundary around our thinking and say, I'm going to ignore these other things that might affect my decision, but probably won't. I'm trying to streamline that process and get to the point where I don't need the best possible outcome. I just need the first outcome I can produce that will work. And then I get to quit spending time and money on that. Now, some of the tools that we use to do this kind of analysis for rational or bounded rational decision making, one of the most common is a very interesting emerging technology called data mining. And data mining is simply gathering huge amounts of information and running it through a set of complex software analytical tools that look for relationships. Look for when customers do one thing, what's the likelihood that they'll do something else as well? When this happens, what else happens? And you look for patterns inside the data that have not become obvious before. The other thing we use is regression modeling, and this can be very simple or very complex math models. It's a quantitative tool where we look at what's happened in the past and we attempt to predict the future based on that. So when we looked at our model of upside and downside risk with a sales forecast, we took sales in previous years and we extended that trend line using a process like regression modeling. This thing can be used to predict how employees will behave based on how they have behaved and the performance reviews they've received in the past. It can be used to predict how customers will behave. It can be used to predict almost anything where there is a previous track record, where there is a past to examine. Now, as we've mentioned, different people and different organizations take different levels of risk. Some of you may be just natural risk takers. You may enjoy climbing mountains, doing things that other people would find frightening. Maybe you're an adrenaline junkie. Maybe you're better at these things than the rest of us. Other people are far less comfortable with risk. They don't want to take these risks. They prefer something safer. Organizations work in exactly the same way. Some of them take more risks than do others. And we call this their degree of risk aversity. The more risk averse you are, the less risk you take. Some organizations can take more risks than others, and that means those organizations have more opportunity to grow, to launch new products, penetrate new markets. What makes one organization able to take a risk when another can't? Basically 3 things. The first is more resources, with the most important resource being cash. If I have enough cash on hand, I can survive the downside. I can take a risk, and if things go wrong and I lose all of the money that I've invested, I still have enough left over to survive and to come back and try again. If I don't have enough cash, I cannot afford to take certain risks. The other thing is if I have more information, if I know more about a risk than do my competitors, then I face less uncertainty. The risk to me is actually lower. I'm able to take that risk because I have a better idea of how likely is the upside and the downside. And then finally, when I've got nothing left to lose, when I'm out of money, out of ideas, when I'm going to bet it all on one thing, if I fail, I'll lose my company, but it looks like I'm going to lose my company anyway. If you want to play a theme song for this, it's probably Janis Joplin's Me and Billy McGee, where the overriding refrain to that song, sometimes freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. If you've got nothing left to lose, you can take an amazing array of risks that those with more to lose are unable to risk. As a manager, you can never eliminate risk. We live in an uncertain universe. There's simply no way to get through it. So what you try and do instead is manage it. You try and gather as much information as you can. You try and make decisions in the best way you possibly can. You provide the most relevant analysis techniques. You use every tool you've got to gather and manage that information. And then when you do make a risk, you ask yourself, if this goes wrong, can I survive the downside and try again? And if not, do I have enough left to lose to dissuade me from this risk? You want to take as many risks as you possibly can, but you don't want to take any risks you don't have to take. That's risk management for managers. I would encourage you to read the chapter assigned to this unit and to look at the questions assigned to this unit and try and answer them on your own. If you have any questions about risks or decision making, if you're uncertain about them at all, pun intended, then please feel free to play this video as often as you like.